Hello there my fellow notebook aficionados and welcome back to the channel. You might remember this good looking fella right here in front of me from our preview we did just a few short weeks ago, right at the beginning of this year. And today I can finally give you all of our measurements for Dell's resurrected XPS 14. And with Panther Lake beating at the heart of it all, it might be the most refined version of Dell's interpretation of what a sleek, portable yet powerful enough laptop for today's day and age might look like. And while you will pay a premium for the prestigious logo on the lid with premium build quality, adequate performance, great on-the-go qualities, a gorgeous display and long run times, this one has a lot going for it. But enough with the rambling, let's talk numbers. We have been able to test two different versions of Dell's new premium 14-incher with the higher-end variants betting on Intel's Core Ultra X7 358H, the integrated Arc B390, 32 gigs of incredibly fast RAM, a 1TB SSD and a 120Hz high-res touch-enabled OLED. Contrary to that one, the more affordable option exchanging the self-emitting display tag for a tried and true IPS, being able to reduce the refresh rate to just 1 Hz, and in combination with the lower-end Panther Lake Core Ultra 7 Non-X, I have high hopes when it comes to battery life, but more on that later. Of course, you will have to sacrifice quite a bit of GPU grunt, but if you want to stay online for as long as possible or simply want to forget what a laptop charger looks like, it might be well worth the performance trade-off. Or not, but we will see. While we did talk about the whole redesign and the overall comeback of the XPS branding in our preview already, let me still give you a quick rundown of what you can expect for this one. While the 2025 Dell Premium 14, which was in the end still an XPS in all but name, was already a very well made laptop, Dell managed to both shrink down the 14-incher in size and putting it on a very significant diet, and all of that without sacrificing any of the structural integrity. The aluminum unibody chassis feels exceptionally solid and again looks the part as well, and while I personally will miss the silver-white colorway of last year's version, the XPS looks classy and subtle while still sporting an easily recognizable identity with some very clean branding. The hinge is well adjusted and stays in your desired position without any excess wobble, and once again, chassis flex is pretty much non-existent. The overall port situation might be a bit controversial, and while I would argue if you use this one as your daily driver for the majority of your mainstream computing needs, you should hardly run into trouble with free Thunderbolt 4s and a mic jack. But if you want to use the sleek 14-incher for content creation workflows in video or photo editing, which is definitely an option with the X7 variant, a USB-A and especially an HDMI would have been very nice to see. When it comes to inputs, I have nothing to complain about for this puppy, but I have always been a fan of this new XPS keyboard and always found the gapless variant to be quite comfortable while offering a very unique look as well. Key travel is of course a bit limited given the thin chassis, but with very satisfying tactility, you should get up to speed for your workmates, scripts or social media posts in no time. To make sure your fingers can find the active areas of the seamless haptic trackpad, Dell also added subtle edgings, and during our time with the XPS 14, the touchpad worked without any issues with a subtle tactile click and reliable sensitivity. Getting inside the XPS is very involved, but thankfully you can still service or upgrade your NVMe SSD should you need some more space than what you purchased initially, while the RAM is of course soldered. Alrighty folks, let's talk displays, and as I mentioned, we have been able to test both available display options for this one, and the OLED, apart from its glossy glass front and relatively low brightness, delivers on all fronts, with the usual contrast numbers for the display tag, very generous color gamut coverage and accurate factory calibration, which we have been able to push to reference levels with our manual calibration. Unfortunately, the XPS cannot quite keep up with SDR or HDR brightness on similarly positioned laptops in 2026, which is a bit of a shame, and PWM frequency is also relatively low. So you should definitely take this one for a spin should you be sensitive to flickering displays before pulling the trigger. That said, the panel supports VRR between 20 and 120 Hz for a tear-free gaming experience with almost instantaneous response times. For the IPS, you not only get an ever so slightly thinner design, but also a matte coating and slightly higher brightness, thanks to the change in underlying screen tech. Of course, you lose the contrast inherent to OLEDs. That said, what we have been able to measure for the IPS must be one of the highest contrast results ever for this particular screen technology. Color gamut coverage tops out at sRGB, which is a bit of a bummer, but with decent factory calibration and even better results when doing your own calibration, the base model XPS might still be suitable for hobby or semi-professional photo editing, for example. And speaking of content creation, unfortunately Dell dropped the Premiere color support for the new models, which in last year's Premium 14 allowed you to tailor the display for several different use cases. So for me as a video editor, for example, it is pretty vital to have access to sRGB or Rec. 709 presets, which are unfortunately missing for the 2026 XPS. I know this is pretty niche, but considering the XPS has historically been favored by power users and creatives, and with the performance, which we will get to in a moment, I think that this is a missed opportunity to make especially the higher end models more flexible for more involved content creation workflows. But back to the IPS. Response times are pretty slow even for an IPS, so you might notice some ghosting should you want to use this one for an occasional Counter-Strike match. But on the other hand, PWM is a non-issue, and as I have mentioned before, the panel is able to reduce its refresh rate all the way down to 1 Hz. So I'm quite curious what this will mean for battery life. But before we get to that, let's talk performance, and as per usual, let's kick things off with the CPU side of things. The Panther Core Ultra X7 358H is actually pretty much identical to the X9 we tested in the ASUS ZenBook Duo a little while ago and offers 16 cores spread across a hybrid design consisting of 4 performance, 8 efficiency and 4 low power E-cores, whereas the Core Ultra 7 355 in our lower end configuration has to make do with 4 P-cores and just 4 efficiency variants, pretty much resembling a Lunar Lake config. In our CPU rating, the X7 in the XPS is slightly behind the X9 in the ZenBook, but slightly ahead of its predecessor, which may not sound like much, but considering the much smaller and thinner chassis in that in today's day and age, peak CPU performance is not that important, I would say, well, you will hardly find something to complain about here. The Core Ultra 7, on the other hand, is naturally paying the price for its reduced core count and offers about what we have seen from Lunar Lake powered laptops, which is definitely still enough for most everyday entertainment or productivity shenanigans, but you might have to deal with longer wait times when attempting more advanced computing endeavors. Our system performance numbers for the higher-end XPS 14 are very impressive, and the combination of fast CPU cores, the beefy integrated GPU and the incredibly fast RAM deliver a very streamlined computing experience. Not just for all of the everyday stuff, but as I mentioned in our ZenBook Duo review and HP Omnibook preview video, even for content creators who do not quite need a full-on workstation and prefer to have something smaller and lighter, the Panther Lake X7 can be a great recommendation. The Core Ultra 7 delivers adequate numbers, and if you recall our preview we did for the new XPS models during CES, that engineering sample was actually running with a Core Ultra 5, and even that one performed quite alright for all the usual things you would do with a laptop. And since not every user is into editing videos or photos, the CPUs are definitely more than fast enough for your day-to-day experience. Drive performance is also quite solid on the high-end XPS 14, whereas read speeds leave a little bit to be desired on our Core Ultra 7 variant. Again, if this is something you would really notice, well, I guess that depends on what you plan to do with your shiny new notebook. Alright, so how about we talk graphics, and the B390 in the XPS performs about on par with the X9 in the ASUS ZenBook in our synthetics, which is actually great news since it seems like you would hardly have to shell out the extra cash for Intel's new Panther Lake flagship. The smaller, thinner and lighter 2026 XPS also outperforms its much beefier 2025 counterpart running an RTX 4050 at about 35 watts, and it's going to be very interesting how this will translate into the real world in our gaming results in a little bit. The Core Ultra 7 unfortunately does not get access to the higher end GPU tile and has to make do with just 4 Xe3 cores compared to the 12 cores in the Arc B390. Unfortunately, this results in a pretty massive reduction in overall GPU grunt, and while the CPU part might have been able to keep up with Lunar Lake and AMD's latest offerings for that matter, on the GPU side, the lower-end Panther Lake offering disappoints quite a bit. Comparing actual FPS in games, and despite the advantage in synthetics, the XPS 14 is about on par with its direct predecessor, which I would still call a win given the smaller and more portable chassis and the overall efficiency gains. The Core Ultra 7 on the other hand can't even offer half of the FPS in Cyberpunk in Full HD and Ultra settings, and things look even worse in Baldur's Gate 3. So if you want to do some casual gaming with the XPS 14, the X7 config will definitely give you a much better experience. These are all the games we tested in 1080p and high settings, and as you can see, you can easily get playable results, and considering the additional tuning potential with Intel's XeSS and their multi-frame generation implementation, 60 FPS or more is definitely on the table here. The overall fan noise experience is also quite pleasant for both XPS models, and the ramp up during medium demanding workloads is pretty slow, so you won't be disturbed by the two fans whenever you open a browser or install a new app. The Core Ultra 7 also remains a bit quieter during mixed usage and when playing games, which it showed given its superb performance, while both variants pretty much top out with the same max fan noise during our stress test. Internal and external temperatures also offer nothing to complain about, and even under load you can use the XPS 14 on your lap. It might get a bit warmer, but you will definitely not get sweaty thighs unless you plan to do a 2-hour gaming session. Which leaves us with battery life, and in a surprising turn of events, the OLED model actually delivers better results than its IPS counterpart, and with 16 hours and 45 minutes in our Wi-Fi web surfing test at 150 nits, you should hardly run into trouble when out and about. The lower end SKU of the 14-incher still delivers about 14.5 hours, so that is still quite respectable. And just as a bit of a side note, we did both tests with the display set to 120Hz since Dell ships the XPS 14 without VR enabled. So results might be even better when the OLED can dynamically adjust its refresh rate down to 20Hz and the IPS to 1Hz. Unfortunately, due to time constraints with our samples, we have not been able to do any additional testing. But I hope we can rectify that situation as soon as possible, so keep an eye on the description or any pinned comments. As per usual, you can also find a plethora of additional information in our written reviews. So if you are after individual scores for additional CPU and GPU benchmarks, more games in other setting levels, or the detailed stress test behavior of both new Panther Lake CPUs, well, you know the drill, please head on over to our website. So I guess all that's left for today is to wrap it all up. And if you ask me, Dell tried to take something that was very appreciated and maybe also loved in the prosumer space with the original XPS and turn it immediately into a stylish lifestyle machine overnight with the 2024 XPS 14 and last year's Premium 14. And while I like what they did, even though there have been some pretty significant usability compromises, especially with the touch function row, they alienated their core user group with something that wasn't necessarily bad, but maybe just a little bit too different. The 2026 redesign tried to bring both laptops together, so from the original XPS, they took the overall idea of putting together a powerful yet super portable laptop that combines a sleek but premium built chassis with high quality inputs, great screens, and solid, if maybe not quite class-leading performance. And from the experiments from the last 2 years, we get the more stylish approach to offer a product to users that are willing to spend more for something that has a unique appearance without any significant compromises for the extra style points. And while I think the XPS 14 for this year leans a bit more towards the mainstream than the prosumer or content creator space, I still think it's an excellent premium high-end laptop, and the X7 variant is a portable powerhouse suitable for a lot of different computing scenarios. That said, you're paying a lot for the high-end laptop experience. And yes, the Core Ultra 7 variant is quite a bit cheaper, but you would really want the high-quality chassis of the XPS to stomach the cost for a performance experience that is lacking quite a bit behind the top-of-the-line Panther Lake options. But with everything going on, laptop prices will definitely be the pain point of 2026. And given the dynamic nature of the situation, it will be very hard to give any recommendation here. But please folks, let me know what you think about the new XPS 14 and if you think they'll redeem themselves with this beauty right here. Please do me the favor and leave a like and sub on your way out, and feel free to have a look around the channel for more about tech and laptops. Thanks a ton for watching. My name is Alex, you have been absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.